Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 11 of Barbarian Banter. I'm your host, Dane Millerhaus, who you will have to forgive for the slightly moist hair. Just popped out of the shower, but I am joined by my co-host,
Jonas Kilker. And Dane, I must say, you look ravishing right now. It's a super cool shirt. I've never seen Twin Peaks before.
It is, as my viewers might know, my favorite show of all time, and I actually made an order for 3 things in January as a late Christmas present to myself. They did a drop, and I completely forgot about it, and it finally arrived like 2 days ago. So it was like a gift to myself I forgot about, and I was like, oh my gosh. So I had to bust it out, even though it's not really related to what we are discussing today at all. But
yeah, no, those are always fun. It's a little Easter present. As we're recording this, it is Good Friday. It's Good Friday, so
yes,
happy Good Friday and Easter to everybody who celebrates.
It will be after Easter that you're watching this, but
yes.
We hope that your Easter is going to be good and was good and will always be good.
God bless. All right, so today for the video, we have queued up. I'll share my screen here. I found this video on YouTube, and I just thought that it was super fascinating. I started watching it a little bit. Hold on, let me skip this part.
Your perfect tax expert. Whatever your tax.
My tax appointment's next week.
So is mine.
Yeah.
Regular video.
All right. Yeah, we can keep that part in then. That's funny. So basically I was watching this YouTube video, 10 Fierce Debates Rocking Ancient History 2025. It is 2026 now, so this is slightly outdated. However, I saw the first couple because I clicked here just to see what was going to be discussed. Let me see. Is that maybe in the... You can see that there. Ancient Egyptian genome, repatriation versus universal museums, Indo-European homeland. I saw a bunch of these and I was just like, this is super interesting. I actually wanted to just send it to you and just get your thoughts on it, but I was like, wait, why don't we do an episode reacting to it? So this is the first time Dane's ever seen this. I've only watched the first 5 minutes or so.
I'm going in completely blind, so I'm excited for what Jonas has queued up for us.
Yeah, I'm also excited for it. Like I said, I've only seen the first 5 minutes, so if it sucks, I really apologize. But by the look of the topics here, I think that we can probably find something interesting in here. And if not, hopefully you guys left us some interesting questions for the end. But without further ado, I will let Mr. World of Antiquity take it away and explain what we're going to be doing.
The past 12 months have been a reminder that ancient history and archaeology aren't just tomes and trowels and trenches. It can be intellectual hand-to-hand combat. Yeah, today we're diving headfirst into that academic crossfire. These are the 10 hottest debates, in my opinion, of the past 12 months among academics and scholars.
All right, so we got to take everything with a grain of salt because he did say that these are the most interesting ones in his opinion, so he may have shitty opinions.
We will find
Arguments so fresh, the conference coffee cups are still warm. Number 1, Ancient Egyptian Race Debate. In July 2025, Adeline Morez-Jacobs and colleagues published the first full genome from ancient Egypt, a man from Nuweirat, radiocarbon dated to 2855 to 2570 BCE. Their take, about 80% North African ancestry, plus about 20% Fertile Crescent ancestry, consistent with gene flow between Egypt and Mesopotamia during the Old Kingdom. Co-author Pontus Skoglund called it a rare preservation win that finally lets genetics weigh in on early Egypt's population history. The evidence base now combines that lone genome from Nuweirat with earlier mummy samples from Abu Sir el-Melek published in 2017, which tilted toward Eastern Mediterranean affinities. Everyone asked, how typical was that genetic cocktail? Harold Ringbauer of the Max Planck Institute asked the key question that this limited evidence can't settle. Did Levantine-like ancestry arrive with farming much earlier, or does it reflect movements specific to Egypt's state-building era? More pointedly, does this settle the argument over whether ancient Egyptians were black, white, or something else? The controversy flares because each data set is narrow and can be weaponized. Afrocentric historians contend that colonial scholarship erased Egypt's African identity. Critics of the 2017 study note its northern bias, while skeptics of the 2025 paper call one genome an anecdote, not a population. Traditional Egyptologists counter that race is an anachronism here, urging focus on culture, not color. How might this be resolved? Scale and context. A geographically balanced aDNA project from Lower Egypt to Nubia, spanning dynastic millennia, could map real population shifts, and future debates may finally pivot from racial labels and who should get all the credit to the far richer story of Egyptian cosmopolitanism. Who should?
I feel like I actually didn't watch the entire segment the first time around. I was kind of hoping that he was going to give like a greater breakdown himself on what the actual genetic samples were. And I feel like he kind of left that up to the imagination. So let me see if we can go back and see what they're actually showing here. Do you have any immediate thoughts from what he sort of discussed?
I do. I don't know if you want to. I want to get into this first, 'cause that's far more your area of expertise than it is mine.
I mean, my only immediate like when you're looking at ancient samples like this, of course, sometimes there will be like there will be a study that will come out and say, oh, they discovered that these populations had X, Y, and Z genetics. But a lot of the times you do have to take into account the fact that maybe there was only like 15 graves that they found, so they're only looking at 15 different individuals. Maybe they were all in the same location, so they came from a similar tribe or something like that. And then at the same time, you have to remember, especially back in the day, like this is the sort of the same thing that we see when we're looking at like Indo-European burials. A lot of the kurgans that we find that contain the genetic samples of Yamnaya people, Proto-Indo-European peoples, whatever, they're typically like elites or like kings or something that were worthy of being buried in these kurgans, right? It wasn't reserved for just every random person. So that plays into it. It's like maybe you're only seeing samples from nobility, so their genetics are going to look a little bit different. Maybe they're more homogenous, and this leads you into thinking that they were all one exact thing when really the population might have been a little bit more diverse. It kind of sounds like maybe he's saying the same thing here. I'm not like a geneticist by any means, so I don't know for sure. And even by looking at this, I'm still kind of just like, I kind of get it, but what am I really looking at, you know?
Right.
Yeah. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's obviously genetic wise is not my specialty, but I think more generally the sort of debate around like who owns history and who owns specific parts of history, and of course ancient Egypt is one of those where it's like he said, Afrocentric historians tend to want to claim it for Black Africans.
Africa. Yeah.
And then there's the other side where the white guy on the pharaoh, where it's like
Yeah.
we were pharaohs and such. So there's like
And such,
there's definitely
with the blue eyes, yeah.
And I think what he's kind of saying is there's enough evidence of these different genetics where if you have an agenda, you can definitely pick and choose and kind of like spin your own narrative. And I think the goal for someone like me is I just want to know what it looks like. Like I don't really care one way or to the other. I want to know what these people looked like, and I want to know
You just want to know the truth. It's
society.
not going to bother you if it's one way or the other.
Right. And also just this looks like the Old Kingdom time for Egypt, at least the one you have on screen here. But
yeah, I think this is what the article was about, and it looks like it's even just one male. And I think that was the argument that the counter scholar that he proposed had a problem with, is that this man is just an anomaly. He's not the entire rule. Because it looks like it says here, a whole genome from an adult male Egyptian excavated at Nuweirat.
Right.
Radiocarbon dated to 2855 to 2570.
Right. Yeah, no. Yeah, it's one man. Also, I think people don't understand how long Egypt was around as like a state. Even the Old Kingdom, because you have the Old Kingdom, I think Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, and that's all before the Macedonians and Ptolemies come in. So that's ancient Egypt is unfathomably long in its history. Like the United States has been around since 1776,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, can you imagine being around for as long as Egypt? Like, of course, things are going to change and shift
They're going to look different,
over
exactly.
time. And then when you look at like Roman emperors, for example, because of course, Egypt, you've got pharaohs, and that's what we think of: kings, pharaohs, buried
And such.
in pyramids, mummies.
Mhm.
You like Roman emperors started coming from Dacia, Pannonia. Like they, if you just looked at one Roman emperor's DNA, if you could get it, it probably would not complete a paint a complete picture of Roman history.
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
it's such a small sample, like you said, one man in one specific point in time in Egypt's history here. So it's hard to extrapolate a lot about their society just from.
Yeah, and I do understand that, like, you know, the science is not, it's not so primitive that it's just like they find one thing and they just agree that that's what everything is. I know that there's nuance involved and they recognize this too, because at the end of the day, like they're just doing the best that they can. They're taking what, you know, they have available, and not everybody is entombed, not everybody is buried, not everybody is preserved. There's a, you know, a large tradition in most places of the world of inhumation, or not inhumation, of cremation, you know, and so we're just never going to really know for the most part. But I think it's about that sort of like sequencing, and then also uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Triangulating, kind of like if you see this grave shows this grave shows this, and this one shows this. If they all have something in common, you can be like, all right, this was clearly common to these peoples. This is where like haplogroups come from. You know, we can see we could trace the migrations of haplogroups and that sort of thing. So it's a cool paper, especially because it's so old. I think that that's one of the things that's like probably the coolest part about this. It says most of his genome is best represented by North African Neolithic ancestry, yet approximately 20% of his genetic ancestry can be traced to genomes representing the Eastern Fertile Crescent. So we can call him 80% Neolithic North African and then 20% like Mesopotamian or something. And honestly, that's probably what you would expect.
Yeah.
And the real question becomes, what did Neolithic North Africans look like? And I'm sure that there's videos out there that you can go and find that out. But one thing that you should consider is the fact that North Africa is right on the other side of the Mediterranean. We know what Neolithic or Bronze Age Mediterraneans looked like. You can kind of infer that they probably looked relatively Mediterranean to a degree. I think that that's probably.
We still see that even to this day in North Africa and the Middle East. There's tons of different ethnicities that people tend to forget how big these regions are and how far back some of these ethnicities go. And if you think of all of Africa as like sub-Saharan or all
Right.
these different ethnicities within Africa, you kind of forget that the continent is huge and there's tons of people who live on it from top to bottom. So same with the Middle East, right? We tend to think of like Arab ancestry or what have you, but it's full of different people who look different and have different histories. So it's in North Africa, especially being on the Mediterranean, there's tons of trade routes and empires coming through. It's a very dynamic region.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
So yeah, that definitely adds to the complexity of something like this.
Totally. Very cool. Shall we move on to the next subject?
I'm ready.
Who should own the world's antiquities? The countries where they were created, or the museums that now display them? That question boiled over again this summer when France introduced a bill that finally opens the door to returning colonial-era artifacts to their original countries, at the same time insisting the national collections remain inalienable. Weeks earlier, the Netherlands handed another trove of Benin bronzes back to Nigeria, adding weight to calls for permanent restitution. And in London, politicians on the right warned the British Museum that any deal to reunite the Parthenon marbles with Athens would undermine British heritage, drawing scorn from classical archaeologists who called the threat culture war theater. Pro-repatriation scholars argue that many marquee pieces left Africa, Asia, and the Mediterranean through coercion or outright looting. Returning them restores cultural memory and can jumpstart local tourism economies. They point to successful recent handovers, like Germany's 2023 Benin shipments, as proof that major collections won't collapse when they let go. Universal Museum defenders counter that encyclopedic displays tell a global story in one place and ensure conservation standards some source nations still lack. They also warn that once a return precedent is set, political campaigns could empty Western galleries piece by piece. A workable piece may hinge on hybrid models, renewable loans that rotate objects home for long exhibitions, joint conservation labs funded by both parties, and 3D scanning that puts full-resolution replicas online for anyone, anywhere. Number 3, where...
All right.
Okay.
Repatriation or universal museums. Who should own the artifact?
I think this one's complicated because there's a lot that goes into it, and it kind of relates to what we were just talking about with Egypt, where some of these histories and peoples, they go so far back and things have changed so much where it's hard to say who even is the closest owner. Like, say, for example, something comes from a Roman artifact comes from Britain or Turkey or even North Africa, as we were just talking about. It's a Roman artifact in these regions that used to be controlled by Rome, the Roman Empire, based out of Italy. So is it Italy's? Is it England or the North African countries? Like, who really owns it? And that brings up a question, is who is the most rightful...
Roman.
Yeah. Or do they all kind of get to share it because Rome conquered these areas and put its fabric into its history? It becomes very... It's not as cut and dry. I think with some artifacts where there clearly is a group of people who still... that would have been their direct heritage, that might be an easier thing. But a lot of these artifacts, you can't... There's nobody that you can cleanly say, it's yours.
Yeah.
I'm giving it back to you.
Yeah, there's a few. Like, for example, I know one of the biggest ones is the fact that I think it's the British Museum owns one of the Athena statues that was underneath not the Parthenon. What is it called? Next to the Parthenon. I'm forgetting the name of it. But it's like those figures of Athena, and they're like holding up the roof basically right next to the Parthenon on the Acropolis. I did go to the museum in Athens to see the original marbles, and they have all of them save for one because the British Museum has one. And it's kind of one of those things where like the docents and the tour guides were all saying like how unfair it is that this statue is separated from her sisters, and like there's all like, and I kind of get it because it's one of those ones where it's like there is a gigantic museum in Athens. It's right across from the Acropolis. It's at the bottom of the hill. So anybody who goes and tours the Acropolis is able to go straight into the museum for another 20 euros. And then you can see the originals. And to be able to see all of them is like, is it really that much cooler than seeing all of them except for one? I don't know. I still had a great time getting to see the originals and all that and take videos and stuff. I don't know if having an extra one there would have changed the experience in any way.
Right.
And maybe it is kind of cool that a person all the way in London, if that's where the British Museum is, I'm actually not even sure, is able to see something from ancient Greece, like in their own country. And I think about the fact that, like, I live in Los Angeles. I go to the Getty Museum and the Getty Villa all the time. I love going there because they actually do have like a few originals, and also like the villa itself is like supposed to be a recreation of an ancient Roman aristocrats, like what do you call it? Their outdoor area. I'm forgetting the name.
I
Yard. I can't remember.
yeah,
There's like a
it's
specific
I know
name
that I
for
know
it,
what
but
you're talking
you know what I mean?
about. I can't remember the name either,
Yeah.
but
And I love it because they have a few originals. They've got some like coins, and they have a few original like manuscripts and stuff. And it's all very it's mostly Greco-Roman stuff, but it's super cool. And they have exhibits sometimes where they will share stuff from different museums. And I think that maybe that's the answer, is like sharing, but also then you sort of run the risk of like degradation of artifacts being lost potentially, I
yeah,
guess.
that does
Um,
introduce some risk.
yeah, looting is an actual issue still. People still steal artifacts from museums. And also, there's probably a lot of places that I would imagine that are just not going to have a lot of tourist attraction anyways, but probably have some very fascinating history that, you know, I don't know how many people are going on a summer trip to like the middle of Russia, let's say, far away from any of the major cities, but maybe there's some cool artifacts from there and somebody wants to see it. It's like, are you not going to put it in Germany or England or even like somewhere like St. Petersburg or something like that? Is that the name of the capital? No.
Of Russia,
Yeah.
Moscow.
Moscow. Yeah.
Although I think
Uh,
St. Petersburg is a very major city
It's a
in
major
Russia.
city, right? Yeah, but you see what I mean? Like I just don't know if having the artifacts in their original hometown is always necessary. Maybe save for the case of somewhere like Rome or Athens or Moscow. Then sure, but
But then there's also there's also the question of safety for the objects, because some of these
right,
regions are very unstable or war torn, and I have
true,
read
so true. Hadn't
about
even thought of that.
like ancient ruins and things being destroyed, like in Syria or other countries that unfortunately are in violent
Just war
conflict
torn.
right now. And
Yeah.
it's like, is it is it worth taking it or keeping it out of their hands if it's going to
Yeah.
be safe, but also if it really and truly is theirs to a degree, is it yours to say, I'm going to keep it safe for you? It's like, I wouldn't want someone to
Gosh.
come into my house and like take something because they think I'm going to break it, right? It's like, if I want to break it,
Yeah.
it's mine to break. It gets really, and then there's the whole question of like, a lot of these imperialist powers, yes, they did loot and take things because they thought it was cool.
Right.
But they found things that the locals had kind of forgotten about or weren't able to find in the first place, and kind of dug them back up and
That's the other
properly
point too. Is like
cataloged. Like,
who are
they put
who
effort into the practice as well.
Exactly. Like you got to take into account who excavated it or who funded the excavations, because it's like if if an archaeologist team from Germany put in all of this money and all of this effort and years of research into finding something in Syria, like is it not theirs to be able to put into a museum? Is it not theirs to choose what to do with it? Do they have to hand it over to the Syrian government? That's obviously a random example, but I'm just saying, you know.
Right.
So yeah, it's not as clear cut. I would love to just be the sort of person that says, yeah, whoever, like whatever, wherever it's from, just leave it there. But that's not the right answer most of the time,
Right.
and it is kind of important. I think it's a case by case basis.
Yeah, yeah, and I think most generally I would hope that there can be cooperation between the country that may have it and the country where
Hmm.
it's from, and they can come to some kind of agreement or what have you. Like if Germany sent back some Benin artifacts to Benin, and it looks like it was a cooperative joint effort and they feel it's going to be valuable there, then I don't see any reason for that not to be the
Right.
case. In fact, maybe sometimes you could have a little exchange or something, right? It's like,
Right. We'll trade.
give me a couple of your artifacts, we'll give you a couple of ours. I know that's very, very generalized, right?
Sure, but
I would like to. My ultimate hope would be that we try to make history as accessible for people as possible.
right.
For both the people whose heritage it is and also just the world at large, because we're all part of a human story at the end of the day. And but it's not. It really isn't that cut and dry. So I think you're right on the case by case.
Yeah, or maybe it should just belong to the strong. Whoever can-
that is also a viewpoint, and that's, I guess, how it was for a while. If the Romans thought something was cool, they would take it, and that was that.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to the next one. The next one is the Indo-European homeland.
Number 3, where did the Proto-Indo-European language begin?
I can hear the comments typing as this occurs.
Yeah, and it's like they're already gonna be like they're Turkic, obviously. No, I'm just kidding.
Actually, my
Yeah.
small village in Serbia.
Yeah, exactly. That's where they come from.
Study argued that the ancestor of all Indo-European languages.
Also, want to note that he is talking about languages. He said Indo-European languages twice. So because I have seen this paper before, I had to use it obviously for my Indo-European migrations video, and it's mostly on genetics. It's not about language, and he's mentioned language twice.
Most likely formed among Caucasus Lower Volga CLV groups about 6,500 years ago. It labels this ancestor language Proto-Indo-Anatolian. The Anatolian languages then split off from it, and Proto-Indo-European, PIE, which did not include the Anatolian languages, crystallized later among the Serednisi communities north of the Black Sea. The well-known Yamnaya then spread PIE widely, but they weren't the first speakers. The case rests on hundreds of newly sequenced ancient genomes, which show strong links between Yamnaya and those earlier CLV populations. And it offers a neat solution to an old puzzle. Hittite and the other Anatolian languages never showed the classic steppe genetic signal, and there are elements of their language group that differ from all other Indo-European languages. Immediate pushback came from linguist Paul Hegarty, lead author of a groundbreaking 2023 phylogenetic paper, who promoted a different theory. He argues the new model is a retreat with some smoke and mirrors in how it redefines Indo-European. He points out that the new study contains no linguistic analysis, calls the new DNA silent on language, and argues that early Indo-European farmers emerged south of the Caucasus in the northern part of the Fertile Crescent. What is the path to resolution? Well, secure genomes from 7,000 to 4,000 BCE Anatolia would probably fill the glaring gap between Neolithic farmers and documented Hittites and allow scholars to integrate language data with ancient DNA maps. Until then, every new data set seems to redraw the language family tree in some way and keeps this 200-year debate galloping.
So, any immediate thoughts?
Not really. Obviously, you know a lot more about the linguistics and history in that region. It's fascinating from an objective perspective of trying to put together what limited data we have to tell these very complicated stories. But I don't have any immediate agreement or disagreement. It's just enlightening to me.
So, from my understanding, and again, I'm just an enthusiast, I'm a hobbyist, I don't actually understand how all of this stuff works, so please take everything that I say with a grain of salt. But from my understanding, the previous hypothesis, because I'm even reading this book from the 1950s called The Aryans, and it's talking about what the potential what the hypotheses are at that time. And it's just super interesting to hear people say like, oh, could be this. And where it's like today we have all that genetic information. We have the archaeological information, and it's very recent, like all within the last 10 years or so. And it is interesting that like 50 years ago, they were just going based off of language alone, trying to trace the genetic origins. And obviously, if you're a linguist or something, that's much more interesting to you because you want to know the original language. Where does it derive from? Who spoke it? Why did they speak it? Because one thing that you see in history is that usually the dominant culture, even if they might be the ethnic minority, their language will usually become spoken if they are the ruling class, so to speak. That's why the Persian language remained supreme all through the Middle East for many decades because they were like the elite aristocratic class in whatever sort of regions they were residing over. And so that language would be spoken. Same with like Latin languages. That's why Latin spread, because it was the Roman language, and it became every other language basically. So essentially, genetically, we know that the culture that spread the language of Proto-Indo-European was the Yamnaya culture, and we do have genetic evidence to show that they come from this upper Black Sea region, like up in here, this sort of interesting shaped figure. However, the original homeland may have been earlier, like in this Caucasus area, because we know that the Yamnaya peoples themselves who lived over here were a blend of Eastern hunter-gatherers who would have come from this steppe territory and Caucasus hunter-gatherers who would have existed over here. And they also had some slight, it's the word I'm looking for, not Western hunter-gatherer, but just some trace ancestry from elsewhere. But Eastern hunter-gatherer, Caucasus hunter-gatherer is the majority of it. And the question becomes, who were the original language speakers? Was it the Caucasus hunter-gatherers or was it the Eastern hunter-gatherers? Because if it was them, then the language comes from up here. And if it was the Caucasus hunter-gatherers, the language most likely comes from like the Zagrossian farmers or like the Anatolians who migrated up this way. I think that is the argument that's being made here. And at the end of the day, I'm not as concerned with like language as I am with genetics, just because I think it's more solid. It's like when you see a genetic study, you see that and you're like, okay, then we can say this person did exist here and they had this sort of genetic makeup, that sort of thing. Because language is so fluid, and because there was no writing, we'll never be able to know for sure. It's all just going to be speculation. I am actually curious because he said one thing that would satisfy this argument would be more Anatolian Neolithic genome sequencing. But I don't exactly know. Maybe I just misunderstand fundamentally, but I don't know how that's going to show them what language was spoken.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just adding more context to help complete the picture.
But we shall see.
I do think, and this of course could never be answered, I think it would be fascinating to take some of these people whose like genomes and everything we're kind of debating over, and try to, if you like brought them to the present via magic, whatever, right? And ask them like, so what do you think about, do you feel more like Eastern hunter gatherer? And they probably viewed their own identity in a completely different way than we do looking back in the past, and be like, what the heck? Of course, this is assuming you would have to figure out how to talk to them and explain to them all these things that they wouldn't have words for.
Exactly.
But they'd be like, what the Eastern hunter-gatherer? What they
What are you
would
talking
probably
about?
not see themselves the way that but we don't have anything to go off of, right? It's not like we have their own conceptions of how they viewed themselves written down or anything. There's And even with more documented historical peoples, Romans and such, they have different opinions of their own identities and what makes them them. So it'd be curious if you could resurrect some of these people and be like, so what do you think about yourself?
Yeah. One thing that is definitely interesting, that I saw Dan Davis tweet about the other day, and it's something that I thought about before too, is that some of these words, like the cognates that we have in English, are so close to the original Proto-Indo-European still, especially the words that were most commonly used. Like if you were to go back 3300 BC and meet a Yamnaya person, you would be able to point at their herd and say cows, and they would be like, yeah, cows. Because the word is so similar. It's like it goes from cow to like ku to like quos, you know? So you'd be like cows and they'd be like, yeah, quos. So
Saying it a little funny, but
yeah, exactly. But mutually intelligible.
yeah, that is funny. It's funny how language can be so dynamic and change so drastically, but it also can just stay the exact same.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
like
It's
some
so
words just don't
fascinating.
need to change. They just
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I made that video about like how English is, almost a 50-50 blend of Germanic and Latin languages, with 25% coming from true Latin and 25% coming from Franco-Norman derived Latin. But yeah, it's interesting that like the only words that were really adopted were the ones for like bureaucracy, politics, philosophy, um, the things that they didn't have to deal with in everyday life. Like the average Anglo-Saxon peasant would have been perfectly fine just using German words, um, you know. And so it's interesting how those come to be and represent the changing of a culture. So I totally understand why we want to know where those words come from. I think that that's probably the most interesting part about the Proto-Indo-European language, is that from the actual reconstruction of the language, you can tell that they were very much a like pastoralist group of people, because they have 9 different words for horse. They have tons of different words for like milk and dairy products. And they have no words for walls, because they didn't have like true walls, you know? And so
right.
you can see the sort of, you can put together the patterns of their language. And I think that that's what makes the steppe hypothesis, as far as the original place of the language, so interesting. That it may have come from the more Eastern hunter-gatherer type people, because the people living in like Anatolia, like he mentioned, that the Hittites have a language that is very similar to Proto-Indo-European, but it differs slightly, not in a way that you would expect a Proto-Indo-European language to change. So it's taking on aspects from other kinds of language families. And also the genetic data of the Bronze Age Anatolians, it's pretty low in steppe ancestry. It's much higher in places like in the Balkans, but in the early Bronze Age, at least, like pretty low steppe ancestry. So they're wondering if there was a split, or if that's where it originally came from, and maybe it changed as it passed through the Caucasus, like it entered a Caucasus portal, so to speak, and just underwent a language shift. Who knows? Super interesting nonetheless. And I think what's even cooler about all this is that it's all happening like right now. Like all of this information, like he said, this has been a 200-year-long debate, but really the genetic studies and the real archaeological stuff has really come out in the last 10 years. So it's cool to kind of be like experiencing it as it goes.
I would agree.
Awesome. We'll jump to the next one.
Number 4, AI versus human translation of ancient texts. In April 2025, a Leiden team ran a bold test. Feed dozens of fragmentary Greek and Latin sentences to both a large language model and a panel of seasoned classicists, and compare their reconstructions to the published editions. The shock came when the AI's guesses aligned with the gold standard more often than the scholars agreed with one another.
The AI toolkit
Fuck.
is live on our
Hey, AI! Wow, what a timely ad, huh?
organized for you.
3 months later, DeepMind's Aeneas system raised the stakes, filling gaps in 90% of trial inscriptions and even proposing likely dates and find spots. That performance sits on a mountain of new evidence, millions of digitized papyri and ostraca, high-resolution scans, and transformer models trained on everything from Homer to market receipts. Yet the same engines sometimes invent smooth-sounding words, erase dialect quirks, or miss anachronisms that jump off.
I had to say that was going to be my immediate my immediate hesitation, because man, sometimes when I'm like, I'll use ChatGPT sometimes if there's like a specific quote that I'm trying to find. Like if I know somebody said something but I don't have the text, I'm like, can you what was the quote where they said it, blah blah blah, and they'll give it to you, but it's so like summarized and like piecemealed to sound like it flows properly, and you're like, that's not the quote, and I know that that's not the quote. What do I do about this? And then you like tell the robot, you're like, that's not the quote, I know you're lying, and they're like, I am incapable of providing the actual quote. And it's like, holy fuck, that's frustrating, you know? It's made me have to download a lot of books on Z Library myself, but maybe that's for the better.
The page to a human eye. Enthusiasts say these tools free researchers to tackle bigger cultural questions. Skeptics come back and say that over-reliance could de-skill young scholars and lock algorithmic bias into future editions of translations. So what should be done? Well, a realistic way forward might be to let the model propose readings, let humans vet every line, and then publish a transparent change log so anyone can trace how a smudge turned up as a syllable. But totally automatic translation might not be in the cards. Number 5.
Thoughts?
Well, it kind of ties. AI is such a big topic right now, and it's in about everything now. You can encounter an AI
every
issue.
field.
And with something like this, AI is people either love AI and think it's the best thing ever, that it can never be wrong, that it's smarter than humans, or people think it's like Satan magic that you should never touch, right? And it's like, if there's a way to utilize it as an effective tool without, and I think that concern of becoming over-reliant, I think that's a very valid concern. Because even if it's right most of the time, if you're using it so much that you forget how to
actually do it yourself.
That could have long-term negative effects. But I don't necessarily, and obviously I'm not in this field, so I don't want to say anything authoritative. But if it's a way to propose and offer something that you can check and compare and contrast, I don't necessarily see harm in it.
Yeah, like I said, or like I was going to say, it's one of those things where it's like everybody is going to be using AI anyways, and we're just going to keep continuing to try and train it to make our lives easier. And it is unfortunate because I think the people who don't really know how to use it properly are going to allow it to do their entire job for them. Like you already see that. I don't know about you guys. I've used ChatGPT enough in my life that I can detect what ChatGPT sounds like. And if you write a script and you make a video and you post it, I know that ChatGPT wrote it because I can hear what it sounds like. It has the same like tone over and over again, and that's another one of my fears. Like if AI, not ChatGPT obviously, but like if AI were to be translating ancient texts, I'm worried that they're also sort of being biased towards like the things that already exist. You know, like it was talking about like translating Virgil's The Aeneid. It's probably also going based off of what translations already exist, and then sort of like AI-ifying it, you know? And I just worry that like it doesn't have the right, because I think he mentioned this in the video too, but like there's a sort of spirit of humanity that comes along with translating an ancient text, because you have to understand the time period, you have to understand the mind of the individual who would have been writing such a text. This is why what's her name? Emily
Wilson, is it?
Emily Wilson is a terrible translator because she's not taking into it. She's a better translator than I am, but she's not taking into account like the nature in which the epics of the Iliad and the Odyssey were read at that time. She's treating it like it's just a regular novel that you would read in the 21st century, and that's simply not the case. It can't be translated as such because then you're missing out on all of the nuance on what those ancients meant by the words that they said. Because yes, the words might have a direct translation to something in the modern day, but it's the same thing with like the dynamic or literal translations of the Bible. There might be literal words that are used in the Bible, but to the people living 2,000 years ago, that meant something entirely different in ancient Greek than it does in English today. You know, like the word logos. Like logos means they used it as the word, but it also had like a much deeper underlying meaning. So you can't just translate it and be like word. There needs to be some understanding of what that means. Luckily, the Bible is so well interpreted that like we can understand it. But if you were to just read it at face value, you're like, fuck does that mean? So that's my fear.
Right. And then I guess it's a question like this Emily Wilson, she took all the things she knows about her field and culture and whatever and approached it that way.
Yeah.
Maybe AI can also take all the contexts of ancient cultures if you put the right input in. Maybe it can do a good job. I don't know. I don't know what the capabilities of. I'm sure they're not using Chat GPT.
No. They're using much better. They called it Aeneas something.
But there's kind of a related debate because I know someone, Roman Helmet Guy, he was publishing Venetian diplomatic letters for like Venetian diplomats in like the Ottoman court or the French court, or you know, they're like, because Venetians are always little schemers getting in everyone's business,
including Kublai Khans.
Yes, including the Khan himself. But AI was used to help translate it. But he's also making it free and accessible to people like me who don't know, even though I should probably know more Italian than I do. I can't read 15th, 16th century Italian. I can't.
Yeah.
And I never will have the time to learn that and be able to read it myself. But nobody in the history field was translating these. So it's like,
at least the work is getting done.
Yeah, if let's say I'm making this up. AI does an 85% job translating these letters correctly.
Like 85% accuracy.
Yeah. Is having that 85% better than having nothing at all?
Right.
And is it harmful to the layperson? Is it helpful? To me, it at least indicates, well, here's a big blind spot that historians should be translating. And I think having, at least at this stage, a human translation would be better. But is it bad for me to read this if it's still mostly...
If the alternative
correct?
Is nothing, then no.
Yeah, you can still get a peek into the mind of these diplomats, and they're telling like hilarious things. It's like total spy intrigue drama.
Yeah, that's cool.
But it's like, I don't know, it's just a question of validity and ethics and all that.
I think, like he mentioned, so long as we still have scholars who are proofreading this, and as so long as the field of classics maintains this sort of integrity to be able to look at the translations and be like, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, and be able to make those human adjustments, I don't necessarily see anything wrong with it. I think it'll just help bring history to a wider audience. It'll help bring ancient texts to the public, and that's always going to be a good thing, in my opinion. So I think this is a good thing. I think this is a win. So long as we don't let it spiral out of control and control us, and as long as we don't get lazy. I think that with the case with AI, so long as we don't get lazy and allow it to do everything for us, I think we're okay.
It's a tool. I mean, I don't obviously don't use AI to write my scripts, despite some accusations, but I do use AI for the captions. But it's like there's no value in me hand doing captions, right? I mean, you know
Oh,
this
hell
too.
no. Hell no. Hell
It,
no.
it's completely pointless work to do by hand.
Yeah,
But writing a script is absolutely a valuable skill, and I would never want to
totally.
unlearn how to write for the
Hmm.
sake of convenience. So it's just the
Yeah.
tool. Are you using it for a valid purpose? Are you using the tool? Is the tool using you? It's all that debate.
If anyone out there is capable of making an AI bot that can create that can generate overlays for my videos so that I don't have to spend literally 8 hours a day searching for all of the images and placing them in the video myself, I would do that. I'll say right now I would let AI do that for me. It'll never write my scripts, and I'm actually proud of myself because I haven't gotten an AI script accusation in a long time. It means my writing is getting better. But yeah, the fucking overlays. I hate it so much. I wish that an AI could do it. It just
Yeah. People who don't make these kind of videos don't know that the images is the hardest part,
that is the
not
hardest
the
part.
writing.
Yeah, awesome. All right, shall we go to the next?
Were there true cities in the ancient Amazon? Back in January 2024, a science cover story raised some archaeologist eyebrows. LiDAR sweeps over Ecuador's Upano Valley uncovered gridded avenues, 6-meter high platform mounds, and canal fed garden plots dating to 500 BCE to 300 CE. Lead author Stefan Rostein dubbed them garden cities, arguing that tens of thousands of people once lived in a low density urban landscape, rivaling classical Mesoamerican towns. Since the 2024 science paper, coverage this year has amplified the Upano findings. Supporters say the scale is the story. Statistical modeling now projects 10,000 to 24,000 pre-Columbian earthworks across the basin. They have been amplifying LiDAR results that point to vast engineered landscapes. Thousands of earthworks, gridded roads, garden plots, even orchards. But there has been pushback. Ancient Americanist Fernanda Ugalde criticized the lost city hype that followed the science paper, noting that Upano's platforms, canals, and roads have been known for almost 50 years. In other words, the novelty is overstated. Alejandra Sanchez Pollo, an archaeologist who co-authored the 2023 LiDAR overview of the Upano Valley in Ecuador's National Institute of Cultural Heritage Journal, notes that her team had already published remote sensing results before the science paper. We had the opportunity to work all of that data, she said, but since we weren't publishing in science, it didn't create the same stir. Both of them caution that claims about cities should rest on excavation, as much as on eye-catching scans. How can they settle this?
By actually excavating.
No, by using Shopify. Are you paying attention?
Well, treat LiDAR as the map, not the verdict. As archaeologist Mark Robinson put it, LiDAR gives the magic landscape, but teams still need radiocarbon, GPR, and trench-by-trench ground truthing to answer population and permanence. Rostein's group says that follow-up is underway.
Well, this is actually something I've been curious about for a while, and I followed some threads. With these, I've seen these scans specifically, but also
Cool.
just a more general idea that there were a lot more there was a lot more development and civilization in these areas than previously thought. And someone even characterized, like, there's a lot of hunter-gatherer tribes still living in South America, Central America,
Right.
remote indigenous hunters. And their proposal is these aren't just like a continuation of ancient Stone Age people, but people more so living in like a post-collapse of some or many ancient kingdoms and empires. And of course, we see cycles of rises and collapses in European and Middle Eastern and other areas of history. And we know about ones in, like, with the Mayans and such, to a degree. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if there were a lot of secrets hidden in the earth and in the jungles of civilizations that existed, or kingdoms, whatever, that got collapsed for whatever reason, got overgrown, and the people kind of
Had to leave.
leave, and maybe got a little more primitive in technology and everything. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised at all. The jungles are thick, and that region of the world is very hard to penetrate, because it's so overgrown and dangerous.
Yeah.
But so I'm not saying I believe there's like some like Atlantis tier civilization per se.
I don't
I'm
know.
not saying there's not,
Right.
but I'm definitely very open to the possibility that there's a lot of history we don't that hasn't come to light in those regions.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you see that sort of blending of mythology and history converging in these findings, because it's the same. It reminds me of I'm trying to remember exactly what the period was called. I think it was called like the Green Nile period or something, where in ancient Egypt, when the climate was a lot different, like 10, 12,000 years ago, the Nile River Valley would become like lush with vegetation when the river would overflow. And there was actually there was like, I don't know if oasis is the right word, but it was like much more vegetative, and looked a lot different because the climate was so different that long ago. And then obviously the climate changes, rivers dry up, agriculture is not possible in the same way. And you can see that same change in a place where like maybe agricultural conditions were perfect in the Americas, but then as the climate warmed, it became overgrown and uninhabitable, in the same way that the Nile went from being perfect to way too hot for agriculture to be like to the same degree.
And I'm not an expert in Mesoamerican history, so don't quote me on this, but I think at least one of the proposed ideas for why the Mayan civilization kind of declined was to do with changing climate and
Mm-hmm.
making farming and feeding an urban population more difficult.
Right.
So certainly possibility in that area of the world.
Could also be Atlantis, though.
Could. Although I do think I think they said a team's going in. Is
Oh,
that
cool.
I think he said that at the end there, and it's maybe there's some, maybe this is still like a work in progress. Maybe we'll get some new answers when you get boots in the ground in there, and hopefully are able to find some
Yeah.
finds.
One of my biggest gripes with archaeology is the politics involved of like being able. I mean, I understand it, but it also just it upsets me that there will be times where they're like, oh, there's this potentially incredible excavation to be had in this region where we have awesome LiDAR scans. We know that there's something down there. Let's get in there. And they're like, no, because the politics of the region does not allow for excavations of this
Right.
time of the year, blah, blah. And it's like, all right, well, fuck. Then, like, we're just going to sit on
And,
top of it and just speculate forever.
It kind of goes back to that debate about who owns artifacts, right?
The
It's like,
artifacts, yeah.
if you're sitting on a potentially history changing set of undiscovered archaeological finds, but you're not going to let anyone see it, is it your right to say no, or
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I suppose it kind of is at if it's undiscovered. I guess it kind of is your right to say no. You're not sticking your shovel in my dirt.
Exactly.
It's unfortunate,
Yeah.
but I guess it's your right.
Yeah. Oh, there's
Or
definitely
you can just
civilization
sneak into the jungle yourself and just
Yeah. Rogue
Indiana
archaeology.
Jones. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, very cool. All right, shall we go to the next? Celtic identity.
Number 6, Celtic identity, ancient reality or modern invention. In a new book published in 2025 titled The Celts, A Modern History, author Ian Stewart argues that modern Celts are recent inventions grafted onto historical abstractions, a collage of disparate symbols from the pre-Roman past stuck together with imagination, enthusiasm, and academic linguistics. He refers to the idea of one Celtic people as a Victorian marketing triumph rather than an Iron Age reality. That claim hit a nerve. Historian Peter Beresford Ellis retorted in the Irish Times that Stewart overlooks essential studies and downplays hard archaeological links, Latin art styles, torque burials, chariot graves, and a family of clearly related Celtic languages stretching from Iberia to Bohemia. Stewart's supporters fire back. Classical authors use the term inconsistently, and a paper that just came out a few months ago has argued that Celtic languages originally spread without the spread of people. In other words, delinking the genetics with the linguistics. What could settle this? I'm not an expert in DNA, but perhaps a continent-wide project sequencing Iron Age cemeteries matched with strontium isotope maps of migration would test biological connectedness. One day, hopefully, we will finally learn whether Celtic is an appropriate badge of identity or a brilliant piece of Victorian branding that stuck. Number 7, how early did writing appear in...
Interesting. What are your thoughts, Dane?
Well, again, it's one of those things with identity where it's like it can get pretty messy. But from what I know about Celtic history, obviously there wasn't like a Celtic empire. It's not like a country per se. But I think it's very hard to overlook the cultural and links. And as you've documented before, these people spread was a migration, and they migrated through these regions from the same sort of basis or starting point, the same group of people, if you will. And you can talk about it a little bit better than I can summarize you. But there's also, like, people even say this for the Gauls, right? There's a idea that I've seen in my comment sections that the Gauls were peoples who didn't see anything in common with each other. They were all these disparate tribes that had no commonality between each other, and Caesar invented this like Gallic identity to like give himself more clout for conquering Gaul.
Yeah, and to like neatly put people in a box.
Right, yeah, and also just for ease of classification. But I was reading an article that kind of looked into like the names of Gallic leaders like Vercingetorix or Jetorix, I'm not sure which one's correct, but one even before, and I can't remember his name, but this was before Caesar and Vercingetorix, and his name essentially meant like the great king or like greater king of all or something like that, that implied
I know who you're talking about.
Of a large confederation or region. And so I think that there absolutely was. I mean, the Gauls themselves were Celtic, and I think they had somewhat of a distinct enough identity where a Gaul from one region would probably find more similarity with himself with one from another than he would from, say, a Roman or a Germanic or even another Celt from Spain or Britain.
Yeah.
But identities, of course, and then there's like border regions where they mix, and it's hard. You can't put people in clean boxes. You just never can.
It is one of those things too where I feel like it's easier to do this to a people like the Celts because they were so widespread. Like he mentioned, like you have Celtic territories, and by Celtic they're pretty much they're taking genetics, culture, and language. Culture being artifacts, art styles, that sort of thing. And trying to fit it into one neat box. And like, of course, it's the same reason that we have insular Celts versus continental Celts, because you have people in the British Isles, and you also have like the Celts in Portugal, Spain, and Portugal, and you also even have Celts all the way in Anatolia, the Galatians.
Yeah.
which also has that root of Gaul also too, which is interesting because a lot of the Celtic, I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but you have like the Gaels, the insular Celts, and you also have the Gauls, which are continental Celts, and you have the Gaulatians, which are in Anatolia. So I wonder if there's some interconnectivity between all those names. But yeah, it's like it's one of those things where you know uh you have this the first like real Celtic culture was like the I'm forgetting if it was Laten first or Hallstatt first, but one of them was
I think it was Hallstatt because I
Hallstatt.
think that's what my sword is, the Bronze Age sword down there. I think it's
Okay,
Hallstatt, and
that
then
would
I
make
think
sense.
Laten was starting to get into Iron Age.
A more specified culture within that greater Hallstatt continuum, and that's something that you see across all cultures because obviously the further back you go, the less direct evidence you have, and you're sort of making generalizations about these links between common culture, genetics, and that sort of thing. And the Celts were extremely widespread. So, like, the the Gauls are not the exact same people as the Galatians all the way in Anatolia, but they had a shared language, they had a shared culture, and so in that sense we can call them by the same thing. I think that the question that this argument is getting at is that the right thing to do? And ultimately I think yes, because if you're going to have a shared material culture and a shared language and shared genetics to any degree, there's something connecting you, and I am all for greater connectivity than for tribal distinction. And I know some people aren't, but I think that it's the same, like Anglo-Saxon identity is largely Germanic. Is there some input from like insular Celts, the Britons? Is there some input from, like Roman genetics and culture and that sort of thing? Like, yeah, sure, a little bit. But it's mostly Germanic culturally and linguistically and genetically. So it's like it's that tie-in that if we keep giving all of these names and all of these sort of like distinctions, we're separating a people from their shared history. We're separating cultures. And what's really the point of that? Other than trying to, again, just like the Romans did, try to put people into neat little boxes. Like there's something sort of wrong about that, in my opinion, that just doesn't sit right with me. With that being said, the Celts were historically, as I've mentioned in my first video on the Proto-Indo-European migrations covering the Celts and the Germanics, is that like the Celts were not able to really unify in the way that the Germanic people were because they saw themselves as relatively distinct tribally. And it wasn't until you have like a charismatic leader like Vercingetorix that's able to unite at least some of them to the degree that they could take on Rome. And obviously ultimately lose, but still, it is one of those things where,
Did they lose?
Did they? That's the question, right?
Yeah. Joking.
Yeah. No, but it's I mean, the Picts, for example, like the Scots, the Scots are largely Celtic, and ancestrally and linguistically, and so it's like, yeah, like they did maintain that sort of ethnic homogeneity. So it's certainly possible, and like you can trace that back to its Bronze Age origins. But to sort of like try and separate those people from the people all the way in Central Europe, it's like what's really the point of that if we're going that far back? Why are you trying to separate them? What to what end? I think that's my sort of gripe with it.
Yeah, and I think at a certain point, especially like I think it's absolutely fine to like also include like tribal, like go as deep as you can, but if
Yeah.
you're just trying to give like a general, you can't always go into the nuance of every little tribe when you're trying
Yeah,
to
you'd lose your
broadly
mind.
talk about like the Romans versus the Gauls.
Hmm.
That's a very, I think it's still an overall accurate narrative to say like the Roman conquest of Gaul versus the Roman conquest of however many tribes. I don't know
This
how
tribe
many
and this
tribes.
tribe and this tribe and this tribe and this tribe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And also, I hate to keep using Rome, but Rome's such a good contrast
Oh, they're
because they
perfect.
documented themselves so well, and the Celts
Hmm.
didn't.
Yeah.
um, when you look at like early Rome, you've got like they were a Latin people. They saw themselves, they were a city, but they were all similar enough where they would recognize a Latin as closer to themselves than a Celt.
Right.
And a Samnite is closer to them than a Celt. Like they even though we tend to think of Rome as like insanely distinct from all these other Italic peoples, if we had less evidence about them, like we do for the Celts, we could more broadly say they were just like the Latins or the Italics, and it was some kind of like Italic sphere. It's just that Rome was very good at writing about themselves and also conquering and securing their rule over everybody else. So we have more of their view on their identity, and they impose their identity more on their countrymen and eventually including the Celts, of course. But it's just a matter of perspective.
Yeah, and like, you know, you were mentioning the Italic continuum. The Italic was originally Italo-Celtic, you know, so they originally came from a Celtic descended branch of peoples, and that's what sort of separates the Roman identity from the Etruscan people, for example, because they were in the same region of Italy or similar region of it in reference to the rest of the world, but they had Celtic influence, and so that was like what spurred their language. And so it's interesting that like the real difference is that they were able to unify under a common goal and absorb the Celts that they originally had technically descended from.
Final note on all of that. I do think the Galatians are such a fascinating case because they just go on this adventure back east through Anatolia into Galatia, and I think they even end up eventually in Egypt, if I'm not mistaken,
really?
as mercenaries fighting under the Ptolemies. That might be a different group of Celts, but I know the Ptolemies had Celtic warriors they maintained. There's one great I'll try to get it for you. Angus McBride painting of like a Celtic warrior on an Egyptian barge, and he's just like sunbathing, like
nice,
like total like summer vibe. But and I think it was Galatians. I could be wrong though. But it's like they just went on this giant eastward adventure, like fighting their way across the ancient world. Yeah. Just you and your buddies traveling the world with your swords and winning and losing and just cool stuff. It's cool history. Probably not cool to encounter them if you were on the wrong side of them, but
yeah, maybe it's not a sea people summer, maybe it's Galatian summer.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's jump to the next one.
Number 7, how early did writing appear in South India? The flashpoint is Kiladi in Tamil Nadu, where archaeologist
This is going to be insanely controversial.
Amarnath Ramakrishna has excavated. He argues that the site's earliest phase reaches the 8th to 6th centuries BCE, with Tamil Brahmi graffiti turning up in secure layers. If correct, this would push back the first appearance of writing in southern India much earlier. His 982-page report leans on AMS radiocarbon dates from Kiladi and neighboring sites. A 2024 roundup of 73 samples even flagged an early date of 685 BCE at the site of Shivagalai. But in May 2025, India's Archaeological Survey, ASI, sent Ramakrishna's report back for revision. What? Why? Well, the covering letter says certain parts lack scientific rigor and need, quote, more authentic, unquote, documentation, and that his proposed dating of the site's layers, quote, requires concrete justification. It even suggests the earliest period should be at the maximum pre-300 BCE. A few weeks later, Culture Minister Gajendra Singh Shekhawat told reporters Ramakrishna's report is not technically well supported and needs further validation. Ramakrishna refused to amend his findings, telling the press it would be criminal and immoral to change a completed excavation report. He insists the chronology rests on stratigraphy and lab dates, not opinion. Meanwhile, the ASI also asked retired superintending archaeologist P.S. Sriraman, who ran a brief 2017 season that reported no significant findings, to file an official report of his own, a move that critics say muddies the waters. So the issue here is whether early Tamil Brahmi marks at Kiladi sit in securely dated contexts that truly come from a time before Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BCE. How will this be resolved? I'm not sure what the correct procedure is about the submission of reports and their robustness, but as regards the ancient writing, I don't think the issue will be totally resolved until more can be found to corroborate it. The problem is, what if there never is any further evidence found? Then this report may be a sticky wicket for some time to come. Number 8.
I actually thought that was going to be more controversial because I thought it was going to have to do with something of like, I was thinking along the lines of North India and Sanskrit. Sanskrit being pushed back further because Sanskrit, I believe, like it comes from the earliest is like 1500 BC. So when he said 6th to 8th century BC, I was like, wait, what? And then I realized it was South India. So it's like, okay, they're talking about a different language family entirely.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I don't know that much about Indian history, especially South Indian history. And I'm not saying like I don't find it interesting or something. I'm just not personally knowledgeable. So I don't really have a dog in the race to say like I don't know what the kind of politics and agenda behind each side might be. So if the evidence is good, I of course, if that's when they found writing and it can be corroborated, that's awesome. I think it's cooler to find older writing if I had to pick one, just because I like the idea of things going further back than we expect.
Yeah, right.
But I'm by no means beholden to that. So it's just kind of I don't know all the like nuance behind why there might be more of a disagreement.
Yeah, I don't either. It sounds political. It sounds like something that I don't have time to get tied up in. So I don't really have an opinion on it either.
That I hope they're able to find the truth. That's my hope.
Me too. Cool. Alrighty.
Number 8. Is classics too Eurocentric? In a new book called What is Ancient History, historian Walter Scheidel argued that teaching the ancient world should go truly global, and even wondered just how much language expertise do ancient historians actually need, suggesting that minimal engagement with Greek and Latin is certainly good enough. He proposes folding Greek and Roman studies into a broader survey of world antiquity, freeing curricula from what he calls a Euro-American foundation myth. To back up his position, he cites enrollment figures showing classics departments shrinking in the US and the UK, syllabi that still center Homer and Caesar while skimming Persia, India, and Mesoamerica, and the rise of high-quality translations plus AI reading tools that, in his view, make deep language mastery less urgent. But this got some classicist dander up. Critics like Oxford classicist Edmund Stewart reply that abolishing intensive language training breathtakingly guts the discipline, because entire arguments in Thucydides or Tacitus can pivot on a single particle. Others warn that global ancient history taught only in English risks swapping Eurocentrism for Anglocentrism, while still leaving students unable to read cuneiform hieroglyphs or classical Chinese. Supporters counter that insisting on 6 years of Greek and Latin has already priced most students out, and that comparative modules would show how Athens, Xi'an, and Teotihuacan faced similar state-building challenges. Where could this all be headed? Universities are piloting hybrid tracks, 2 years of language boot camp, followed by thematic cross-civilization seminars, plus shared open access data sets, so that a student fluent in, say, Akkadian can still contribute to something in Roman studies. If such models raise enrollment and preserve linguistic rigor, the Eurocentrism debate may finally cool. Number 9.
What do you think?
So obviously, they're talking at a very high level classic. Talking
Like
about
a
students
doctorate degree.
who have to actually learn these languages, right? more generally, the whole idea of Eurocentrism and all these things, and it's like, what should constitute ancient history? What should be taught? It's tough because on one hand, the curiosity in me, it's like, I want to learn about everything. I want to, of course, know European history, Greece, Rome, all these things, but I do want to know what was going on in China and the Middle East, other places of the world. But also, I think it's like, if you're in China, you should know more about Chinese history than you do about European history. And if you're in Europe, you should know more about European history than you do about Chinese history. It's kind of more relevant to who you are and what shaped your culture and your history, right? And I think there's a certain level of like, yes, you should know more about the things that influenced what helped bring you about, right? And that's not saying it's superior or more important per se. It's just more relevant to you. It's like knowing your family's history versus knowing your neighbor's family history.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think personally, like, of course, that's going to depend on the individual, because, like, you could just be some, like, you know, American kid who's just super fascinated with, like, you know, classical era Chinese history. And if that's your thing, go for it. I don't think that it should necessarily be like a universalized thing to the point where it is necessary to include in university systems. Like, I think the fact that they are already undertaking such an endeavor, classicist or classics graduate students having to learn Latin and learn ancient Greek and read the, you know, ancient texts, learn about European, like the European classical era, that I think there's already so much going on in Europe and their interactions with Persia and the Near East, that's already the graduate program as it is. If you were going to try to incorporate everything from around the world, it's almost an entirely new field of study. And I think that you would have to broaden it so much that you wouldn't necessarily have experts like we have today. Like, you know, the people who go through a program like that, where they have to spend an entire year and a half on Mesoamerican history, and then another one on Chinese, and then another one on South Asian, and then another one, like, you're not going to be able to, like, specialize enough in a field to the point where you're going to have an expert who's going to be able to tell you whether or not Emily Wilson's translation of the Aeneid is fair or not. You know what I mean? Or whether or not the AI is doing a very good job of translating the text. I think it's important that we have experts in those areas. And I'm also of the opinion that you shouldn't fix something that's not broken. If you want to create a new program, create a new program. Why change the program as it is?
Yeah, that's certainly a fair point. It's that specialization versus generalization question. Maybe it does warrant something new, not changing what already exists. Then, okay, this gets into probably something more broad than we want to really go into here. But
it's
then
our podcast.
Or something we might want to cover more in depth at a future time.
Sure.
There is, I think, as curious as I am objectively, there is also the idea of, like, I'm just going to use Rome as an example since we've talked about Rome so much and it's so easy. We could insist that you also spend a ton of time learning about Samnium. I'm just making this up as an example. Not making Samnium up. Samnium was a real thing. But it's kind of taught right now. They were another Italic people that Rome fought. They lost to a few times, but then they adapted and conquered them and integrated them. And they're kind of a footnote of Roman history. And you could argue it's not fair to them that they're a footnote. But it's also like, there's a reason they're a footnote.
Yeah.
Right?
How much more do we really have?
There is this question of, okay, well, who is more important? Who deserves to be learned? Who contributed more? And that question obviously gets very personal, and it gets very hard to to categorize and quantify. So I'm not going to say this civilization or this language or this person is the most important. But it's just that is also something where it's like, if you have to cut something out, there's going to be peoples and places and periods that get less attention because they didn't influence the world as much, and that's just is how it is, right?
Yeah, and at the same time too, you have to take the students and the actual academics who are going into these fields into account. They're going into the field of classics because they want to study the classics that we are studying. They're not going in there going, I wonder what I'm going to learn about, you know?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and if you wanted to specialize in, say, Mesoamerican history, then like you would not go into the field of classics. You would go into a different field. And like I said, like maybe they should have something that's more all encompassing. But then it kind of makes it begs the question, like, okay, if classics is too Eurocentric and it's almost entirely European classics, maybe leave that as a field and then create a new field that is Mesoamerican classics. My question is, I wonder whether or not that program would be as long. Do we have enough material to cover in a 6-year to 8-year long program? Or I guess it was 6-year. 8-year would be incredibly long. Do you have enough material to cover in a 6-year program? Or would you just kind of like finish it and be like, well, move on to the next thing? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not that deep into the history and our archaeology, but that would be my wonder.
Right. And it gets into the question of, well, why are they considered the classics? And
Yes.
the whole Eurocentric debate, it's really hard because there is a reason everyone knows about European history globally more than they do about other places, because the Europeans went around the globe conquering things and colonizing, and well, they did for reasons. And there's Greece and Rome, the classics, are part of that reason to a degree, right?
Yeah, and we owe the Renaissance credit to that.
Yeah. So it gets dicey. I'm someone who is interested in learning about all things, but Greece and Rome are some of my favorites. Obviously, it's hard not to.
Right.
There is just so much ground to cover with them, and there maybe not as much evidence, and it's harder to access evidence like about Persia for someone like me who lives in the United States and doesn't speak an Iranian language, and Iran itself right now, obviously their regime isn't too keen on their Zoroastrian part of their history, and there's also, they're in war right now. I guess we are there too, but it would just be a lot harder for someone like me to learn about Iranian history in the way that I can Greek and Roman history.
Yeah, and I also think that there's nothing wrong in just saying that you're, like you said, I am of European descent. I'm more interested in European history. When people message me and they say, "Hey, can you talk about this?" I'm like, I just don't really want to be honest. I don't.
I don't know enough.
Right, exactly.
I don't know enough. I can't answer, and I would be doing a disservice to try to talk about something I don't know enough about.
Yeah, and it's also one of those things too where if somebody challenges me and says, "No, that's not the case," I'm going to go, "All right, well, I didn't really care in the first, not that I didn't care in the first place, but it wasn't going to be a hill that I was going to die on." So if I'm out here like, discussing research on the new blah blah blah, like it's just not my field, and I'm not going to have like the same dog in the fight as you know what I mean? And so in that set, like I'm doing a disservice by talking about something that I don't have a place in.
I do think if anyone's passionate about a certain time of history, they should have the resources to pursue that as far as they can. But I don't think everyone should be forced to. Right.
Yeah. Agreed. Cool. All right. Jump to the next one.
Petra's treasury tomb. Brand new find or reboot? In October 2024, a joint team working with Jordan's Department of Antiquities, ACOR, and the University of St. Andrews announced the discovery of a rock-cut tomb at Petra in Jordan, beneath Al-Khazna, the treasury, the single most iconic facade in Petra, and said it held the remains of 12 people plus grave goods. St. Andrew's release called it historic, stressing that complete Nabatean burials at Petra are rare because so many tombs were robbed or reused over centuries. Maybe you remember it appeared in an episode of Expedition Unknown.
I was going to say, that
with
guy
Josh
looks
Gates.
familiar.
Gates said, "This is perhaps the most significant tomb ever found at Petra and a discovery of historic proportions." Specialists bristled. Dr. Lucy Wadeson, a Nabatean funerary expert, called the coverage a little hyped up, noting comparable tombs at the site. Bioarchaeologist Dr. Megan Perry pointed out that there's nothing unusual about finding tombs with burials. More important is the question of what the dates and context actually prove. Then came a revelation. Dr. Suleiman Farajat, a Jordanian archaeologist who co-led the Department of Antiquities excavations in front of the treasury in 2003 to
It's a Facebook
2005,
post.
publicly reminded everyone that the very same tomb was already excavated back then. The new work, he revealed, was a revisit, not a first discovery. ACOR later clarified that 2024 season reopened the context and collected samples for analysis.
Something therapy taught me about myself.
As you can
that's
see, I
changed,
don't have
especially,
YouTube
our
Premium.
dynamic, is
Another archaeologist who works at Petra, Dr. Leanne Bedell, revealed that everyone working on this knew that the site had already been discovered, and in fact they were using the original excavation report as a guide, and that when Josh Gates and archaeologist Pierce Paul Kreisman were on camera, supposedly uncovering the tomb, that was all staged. She said all this was damaging to the relationship the American archaeologists have with the Jordanian ones. Where do things stand? ACOR says samples, radiocarbon, OSL, DNA, ceramics, were collected, and analysis is coming.
From what I've gathered of whatever was going on there, I think I do understand the issue that they took, whereas like the Americans, Josh, what was his name? Josh something, Expedition Unknown. I used to watch the show fucking all the time when I was a little kid. To pretend like it's a new find is lying. And if that's what happened, that's what sounded like it happened, then yeah, that's kind of wrong. And they should have given credit to the fact that the site was already excavated and this is not a new find. They're just like revisiting and finding more new things. This sounds more of like a media scandal than an actual archaeological scandal.
Yeah. I would 100% agree with you. If obviously I haven't watched this episode, so I don't know.
Have you seen the show before?
No, I at least that I remember. No.
It's cool. They talk about like myths and stuff. They go hunting for like chupacabras in Mexico and stuff. It was for a little kid like me who was into aliens and myths and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun to watch. I haven't seen it in forever though.
And yeah, I think that's part of it. It's cool that they're bringing these discoveries to an audience. Like we were just talking about history and how it's, harder to learn about other places and things. And that's a way, right? Like you wouldn't learn about Petra as an American kid, maybe otherwise. But yeah. I absolutely do think if there was, I don't know the degree to which was like selective truth or if they outright lied or what exactly.
How bad did they make it look? Yeah.
But yeah, if they presented it as we found this and we're uncovering it for the first time, I think that is dishonest.
Yeah.
Even though it might make for a better show, I don't think it's worth or the right thing to not give credit where credit is due. Heck, we could go out to Petra right now and be like, oh, we discovered this tomb. Barbarian Banter discovers a new tomb. That would just be bald-faced lying and not fair to those who paved the way for discoveries. But it's really not a question of archaeology. It really is a media scandal. I will say though, Petra is one of my favorite archaeological finds, just because it's like it's almost like a dwarven city from like Lord of the Rings, where it's like carved actually into the rock, like a structure. It feels like out of a fantasy
too.
Yeah. Straight out of something you do in Minecraft or see in a fantasy world. It's it feels very fantastical to me, at
Mm-hmm.
least.
Mm-hmm.
So
No,
I
it
think
has,
it's awesome.
it's very seemingly mythically rich, and it's like it's one of those places that challenges the traditional notion of history. It makes people go like, man, like did we have something that we lost here? Is there a missing puzzle piece? Like, how did this actually get here? Who put this here? For what purpose? You know what I mean? It's kind of one of those
Right.
things. So, very, very fascinating. All right, ready to go to the last one?
The final question. Let's see what we've got. Dead Sea Scrolls.
Dead Sea Scrolls redated? In June 2025, the PLOS-1 team, led by Marvin Popovich, unveiled Enoch, an AI that blends radiocarbon results with handwriting metrics to redate 30 Dead Sea Scroll fragments, pushing several, like pieces of First Enoch and the Community Rule, a century earlier than previously thought. Supporters called it the next step in biblical chronology. The data behind the claim are impressive. Fresh, high-precision C14 runs from Zurich and Oxford, multispectral images that let the program measure every pen stroke angle, and a Bayesian routine that fuses chemistry with paleography, a single probability curve. But pushback was immediate. Epigrapher Christopher Ralston told Bible History Daily the new dates for 4Q114, one of the fragments, stretch credulity because internal linguistic clues point later. Scroll veteran Peter Flint warned in Live Science that a 30-scroll training set is promising but premature. By contrast, Jonathan Bendole likes the algorithm for spotlighting scribal quirks scholars miss. And archaeologist Jonathan Adler says critics rely too heavily on what we've always thought rather than measured data. What could settle things? Well, you could run Enoch and a panel of human editors in a blind test on some new fragments, then publish every intermediate step, models, code, error bars, in an open repository. So there you have it, my picks for the 10 hottest academic debates about ancient history in the last year.
It felt like we had this guy on our podcast.
Yeah, really. He didn't get to respond to anything we said, but
No. And he doesn't get to. This is our podcast. But
um,
yeah, that's interesting. So it sounded like it was just the AI was able to date some texts as earlier or having occurred or having been written earlier than they were previously carbon dated. That's what it sounded like, right? Did you gather that as well?
that's what I got, not knowing a ton about the Dead Sea Scrolls myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, from what I understand, because I minored in history at UCLA, so I didn't get to take a ton of history classes, but the ones that I did take, a few of them were on like Christian and like early Christianity and like Near Eastern history, and the Dead Sea Scrolls are essentially like a very recent find. I think it was originally discovered in like the 1950s or something, so it's like that recent. And it was yeah, biblical manuscripts, original manuscripts found in Qumran, I believe is the name of the city. They were found in these caves, and they were well preserved because obviously they're like a very arid climate, does well for papyri, and they were also stored in like storage vessels, like amphora kind of thing, sealed off. It was basically like a library. And so there's all of these scrolls in these cave libraries in Qumran, and they were discovered. And yeah, so that I guess they radiocarbon dated it, and they were able to. I can't remember exactly. Like maybe I can look it up right now when they were originally dated, and where and what this new AI finding. So the carbon dating for the Dead Sea Scrolls shows 2,000 years old, generally dating from the 3rd century BC to the 1st century. Most were created between 100 BC and 68 AD, with recent AI-driven research suggesting some texts may be even older, originating from as early as the 3rd century BC, like the Isaiah scroll. And I think that this is kind of one of those. It's one of those arguments where the Dead Sea Scrolls contains Old Testament manuscripts, like the scroll of Isaiah, is it the original scroll of Isaiah that like we have in the Bible today? Because Isaiah is purportedly written in like 500 BC, or 400, like 450 around then, because it was after the Babylonian exile and the liberation from Persia, or the Persian liberation of the Israelites. So yeah, that's interesting. But nothing older than the 3rd century, so we can't say for sure.
Yeah, obviously I'm not a biblical scholar, so I
What?
don't know. I don't know exactly what implications that might have, but it's fascinating nevertheless. I'm not sure how I feel. This is the second time in this video that an AI has been like named like after the something it's
The thing,
transcribing,
like Aeneas or Enoch.
and yeah, it's like I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. Like it almost feels a little presumptuous to start calling the AI like the actual person you're talking about.
Trying
Like,
to find.
it's
Yeah.
like if we make an AI to go through like Napoleon's writings, are we gonna start calling the AI Napoleon? Like
Yeah.
it's starting to get a little like are we gonna start?
Transhuman.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's a big deal. I just think it's kind of funny where they're like, all right, Enoch, translate Aeneas,
Yeah.
translate the Aeneid. It feels a little I don't know.
Something about it. Something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
Cool.
no, you're just call it like Chat GPT or something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Give
Remind
it
us
a
that
robot
it's still
name.
a robot. Yeah. Let's
Yeah,
let's
call
not
it-
let's not humanize these guys too much.
Yeah, call it XY493. Just give it a fucking robot name. All right, cool. Well, that was the end of that video. I hope that it doesn't get pulled off of YouTube or Spotify for us copywriting this guy's page. I don't know how that even works. This is only our second time doing a little like React video. We'll certainly tag World of Antiquity in the description and everything. But yeah, do you want to jump into a few comments or
Yeah.
questions?
Let's do it.
Cool. All right, so we're back. We're going to jump into some questions here. First question I wanted to address comes from Gabe V2. He says, at the end of the day, and that's it. Because this is a joke that I posted on my TikTok the other day because I was going through the footage from our last episode. Did you see that? Dude, I said at the end of the day like 4 times in that episode. Like 5 times. And I genuinely, I was going through and I was editing it and I was like, please, for the love of God, don't say at the end of the day again. And I said it like 1 minute later and I was like, oh,
all
my,
right.
it's
Audience, let's play a drinking game. Every time Jonas
Yeah.
says at the end of the day, we take a shot.
I don't think I said it once this episode, so you guys should be safe. But on episode 10, you might get a little buzz going. All right, let's see. TNDINP asks, what's your guys' opinion on surfing the Kali Yuga? Hope you didn't record this already. That would have been funny if that was the episode. You want to go first?
I mean, yeah, it's kind of a LARPy phrase.
Sure.
Oh my gosh.
It's like riding the tiger.
Yeah, like people like say it. It's one of those things. But I think the concept behind both riding the tiger and surfing the Kali Yuga, whether you believe in like the Kali Yuga as a legitimate cosmic age or not, this idea of you're in this world and there's only so much you can control about it. How do you best maneuver your way through it without losing yourself or being destroyed or whatever it may be? And in the modern age, kind of is like we can't escape technology very easily. So it's like we kind of have to ride it. We have to surf it. Like, try to preserve ourselves while we can't just off into the forest. Well, we can, but you kind of have to work with the world that you're in. So I think the general idea is actually very good and very healthy. To the degree that I think there's necessarily a cosmic cycle in that we're in a yuga that is the Kali Yuga and it's eventually going to reset. Not necessarily, but
yeah, and there's even there's debate amongst actual like scholars of, I don't know if you call them scholars, probably, right? They're scholars in all fields, over whether or not we're actually in the Kali Yuga, because there's like different datings to the Vedic texts as to whether, what?
Um, funny, just the different datings. I remember the first time I made like a joke Kali Yuga video. Oh, it was a long time ago on TikTok before I started doing long form.
Yeah.
And I like looked at the chronology on one of it, and I was like, "We're only this far into the Kali Yuga."
Yeah.
That ended up being the joke of the video. Is like the look bro gives when we're only this far into the Kali Yuga or something like that. And
Yeah,
I was like,
started.
I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, this ain't something I'm seeing at the end of my lifetime.
Yeah, no, you think it's going to be like 50 years or something of just turmoil, and it's like 500,000.
It's
and some of them are even longer, like the Satya Yuga, or I can't remember which one, but yeah. No, my opinion on surfing the Kali Yuga, what I think it just means to remain hopeful, to remain optimistic despite everything that's going on around you. And also, like, it's kind of one of those things where just on a very practical level, I kind of go about my day and I feel like I see people who are enveloped in the Kali Yuga, like that is their entire, like they're just, I mean, I don't want to call anybody out in my life personally, but I know of people that it's just like every time you're like, hey, how's it going? They're like, oh, it fucking sucks. The world sucks. And you're like, okay, but what are you going to do about it? Nothing. You're just going to skulk and you're just going to mope about it, and you're going to be defeated. You're going to be overtaken by the wave of the Kali Yuga and drown. Why not surf it? Why not try to, at the very least? Yes, it takes effort and it takes energy. That's just like surfing does, or riding a tiger. It's going to take energy and it's dangerous. But you can't just willingly be consumed. And I think this ties directly into the idea that you should not martyr yourself just because dying is easier. You should try to live. You should try to just get the most out of life as you possibly can. I received a message today from somebody. I'm not going to say who, of course, but I received a message from somebody, and they were basically telling me like, hey, I'm a big fan of your videos, and like, or my husband is a big fan of your videos and Harry Miller's videos and the Great Dane's videos. And one of the things I feel like you guys talk about a lot is like this idea of heroic death. And I'm worried that my husband is kind of falling into this place in his life where he's willing to like die for a cause, and I'm actually worried about him. And I think that the message is getting misconstrued. And I was like, that's absolutely getting misconstrued. We have spoken multiple times about how you should not willingly die for a cause. You should be willing to die for a cause, but you should try your best to live for it, because you could do so much more alive than you can dead. In the same way that when it comes to surfing the Kali Yuga, you can make much more change by being active than by being consumed, right? And so I think that that's the idea. You have to have a positive mindset. You have to remain optimistic. And also, at the end of the day, try and create as much as you can. Create your reality, create your wealth, create your visions of the future. Do everything that you can to control as much as you can, because there's a lot that you can't control, and those things will consume you if you let them.
Yeah. Agree 100%. Again, like you, I'm not going to call out someone in my life, but I do know people, and specifically someone a lot, who it's constantly, oh, did you see this? Did you hear about this? Did you know about this? And it's like, yes, you should be aware of what's going on in the world, but you can't let it govern your emotional state, your mental state 24/7. So I'm just like I'll say like, yes, I heard about that. Wow. But it's like, it's not really relevant to me. And it's like, he's so stuck in this cycle of like, where it's just like, dude, if you can't handle it, don't tune in. That's kind of my thing.
Yeah, he's getting barreled constantly by the Kali Yuga. He's not surfing it. He's just getting
online,
laundry machine.
I mean, you see it all the time. It's like people live in this constant state of panic and aggression, and it's, and the irony is they can't do it. Makes them impotent because they're getting all of their energy pulled out into these things instead of creating something for themselves. And it's ironically, if you actually want to shape the world, it's ironically the people who can detach and that become the shapers. So
Yeah, 100% agreed.
I've never been surfing though on the topic of surfing. So.
Oh, we'll get you surfing, Dane. We'll get you surfing.
As a kid, I was very afraid of deep water and sharks. So and I also was terrible at skateboarding. So
they're quite different. You'll be okay. But yeah, I mean, I've never seen a shark while I've been surfing, but I see dolphins almost every single time. Just because where I live, there's a lot of dolphins. So,
no, I think I'd rather see a dolphin than a shark.
yeah, I did one time see a seal went right under me, and it didn't touch my foot, but it kind of like disturbed the water near me, scared the shit out of me because dolphins. That's never happened to me with a dolphin. Dolphins don't really come that close. This seal was really ballsy though. Went right under me, splashed around, and I was like, what the I panicked and was turning around. And then I look and I saw the seal just like sitting on its back looking at me. And I was like, got me.
I will say one time I was on a paddleboard and my brother, I was in a tube. I was in an inner tube. My brother was on a paddleboard, my brother and my little brother. And we saw a marlin, the marlins with the fin. But I thought it was a shark. And we were out pretty far in the water. I was paddling that little frickin'
oh god, yeah.
little frickin' donut thing. I was like,
yeah, but those are big fish. They're still scary.
Yeah, I was like, shark, and my brother's like, nah, there's no shark, and my little brother's crying.
That's funny.
But yeah, you will have to take me actual surfing someday so I can quit LARPing about surfing.
You'll have a blast. It'll be fun. Real Southbra asks, if you could give the moniker The Great to any leader, past or present, who would it be? I'm assuming somebody who doesn't already have.
Just kidding. Just kidding. Oh, this is a good question, actually.
Yeah. Lock in. I almost want to say Vercingetorix because we talked about him earlier.
I'm like, if they ultimately lost, can they still be called the Great?
Yeah.
Are there any of the greats who did ultimately lose that? Well,
Totila.
No,
Totila wasn't the Great. You're saying people who were named the Great that did eventually lose?
Pompey. Yeah, he was Pompey the Great. He didn't lose.
Huh?
He got his title before he lost. He's kind of washed up Pompey by the time Caesar got him.
I guess that's the difference, right? Is like the people who are named the Great didn't actually really lose. Like Alexander didn't really lose. He just kind of stopped and then died. Alfred the Great kind of just like got sick and died. They didn't actually like lose in battle, and their cause was still like their cause had not come to an end during their lifetime. It crumbled after their life, except for Alfred. Shout out Alfred the Great. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say because it's kind of like we talked about Totila a couple episodes ago, and I think that he's deserving of the title for some reasons. Very charismatic leader, was able to rally people together, extremely tactful when it came to warfare against the Byzantine Romans, who were militarily superior to the Goths, and was also just like a very empathetic, kind, for the most part, leader. Is it deserving of the title of the Great, though, is the question.
Yeah. Tough. I feel like I've read about so many figures in history that I would say the Great, but now that when you get asked, it's like, when you get put on the spot and it's like,
yeah.
I feel like I've definitely read about figures like, man, this guy's like the Great.
What about Arminius? Arminius the Great could be.
Ooh, yeah.
How did he die? That's the question.
He was killed by rival chieftains after So he lost to Germanicus and his brother in battles, and then he was killed by rival chief, assassinated.
So his cause was not upheld during his lifetime, though, because if they lost the battle to the Romans,
yeah.
and then he was
didn't
killed
end
by
on a
rival
strong
chieftains.
note.
Yeah. So can't give
kinda-
him the title.
Kind of went out on a not a bang. Might be
It's a tough one.
might be it feels weird to apply it to a more modern figure.
Do it.
But you know what? I'm gonna go Theodore Roosevelt. If he was
I
an
was thinking
ancient
him too.
king, he would get the great. It's just it feels weird applying it to a modern politician.
Yeah.
But I think he's someone who's worthy of the great. He expanded the American sphere of influence a lot militarily. He obviously did a lot for the country, the national parks, all that kind of thing. I think he's probably one of the most recent figures who might deserve the title of the great. Truly, one of my favorite American figures in history for sure. That'll be my answer.
Cool. Good answer.
Theo the Great. Although there's also Theodoric the Great, right? And
Theodoric. Yeah.
and I think even there's a Roman emperor that starts with Theo.
Theodosius.
Yeah, Theodosius, yeah. Lots of
Yeah.
Theos.
It means God almost. I think that's what it comes from in the Greek, theos,
Oh.
or divine or something.
All right, I guess I'm naming my kid Theo something.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna have to see how he died, but I want to say Pelagius of Asturias.
That's a
Pelagius
good one.
death, because very much like Arthur, he's the founder of the Kingdom of Asturias. Died in 737 A.D. in Cangas de Onís, which served as his capital. He died of natural causes after a 19-year reign and was initially buried in the Church of Saint Eulalia. Okay, I'm going with, and he was succeeded by his son.
Okay.
So I'm going with Pelagius.
Great answer.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Sweet. Next question. Sorry about the dogs barking. Hopefully you guys can't hear that. Not my dogs. Captini Helminine asks, which Lord of the Rings character is your favorite and who is the best to LARP as?
Those are two different answers, at least for me.
True.
My favorite character it's probably Boromir.
Okay.
Obviously he has his moment of weakness. But he redeems himself, for one, in a very epic fashion. And for two, he's not, some people kind of like write him off as like a bad person, but he was a very noble figure who had a very noble cause. It's just the ring and its corruption was kind of too much. It was too much for anybody, but especially for someone who it took advantage of the love he had for his people and his father and his country and used it against him. I know he felt that desperation to save everyone he cared about, and it kind of corrupted that. But I think he's a very, very noble figure, and of course, when he dies protecting the hobbits at the end, and he's able to part on good terms with Aragorn, I think it's
Kind of
a very
redeem himself.
Yeah, very, very good moment, and he gets unfairly villainized sometimes, so that's why he's my favorite. He's also just portrayed as a mighty warrior, and I used to play this strategy battle game. It's like a minifigures, like Warhammer, basically, but for Middle Earth. And he was like a beast. He had so many good stats. He could just carve his way through an enemy. But
nice.
That would be my favorite. But to LARP as, I think at least where I am in life, you gotta LARP as Sam, dude.
Dude, I was actually gonna say Sam is my favorite, but he's a good guy to LARP as too. I was gonna say I feel like most guys need to take up the Aragorn archetype uh and LARP as Aragorn, but I would say Samwise is my favorite.
Sam's great.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's the
he's
best.
definitely in my top favorites. Everyone needs a friend like Sam, or
Yes,
should be
exactly.
a friend like Sam. I think actually I might slightly change my answer for LARPing. 'Cause Frodo could also be a good choice just because we live in this time where it's like you have this burden to carry and you maybe don't deserve it, but
But you must make
there's
good on it anyways.
exactly. Oh wait, no, I have a different answer.
Go for it.
The Gandalf
Gandalf.
staff, of course. That
Duh.
should have been my first LARPing answer. Is Gandalf, a wizard?
That is a great one to LARP as.
That's my
actually.
final LARP answer. LARP is Gandalf.
All right, cool. There you go. Cool. Um, Doomer Mail asks thoughts on Mouse Utopia. You're familiar with Mouse Utopia?
Mhm. I actually covered it in high school in my AP Psych course, and I think we covered it again in college when I got my psychology minor.
Really? Oh, yeah, psychology. That makes sense.
And
For the people
I've
who
seen it
don't
come
know,
up a lot again.
because it's very pertinent right now, we are living in the end stages of Mouse Utopia. Do you want to explain to people what Mouse Utopia is for those who don't know?
Yeah, so essentially, and it's been a while since I've read the full thing again, but this researcher put all these mice in this like habitat. I think it was kind of like a tower, if I'm remembering correctly, how it was set up. But
I'm
it's
not
very
sure what the
crowded,
actual physical
right?
structure was.
But they had all of their
Wasn't it not
needs.
crowded at first?
Maybe it
Didn't they,
wasn't
like,
crowded at first, but
Yeah.
here I'm gonna pull it up just so I'm getting my okay. Yes, so
They had
it
adequate
wasn't crowded
resources
at first, but the main thing was that they would always have an abundance of resources, food, water, etc. So their population grew an insane amount. And the whole goal of the experiment was how do the mice live in a utopia where there's no pressure for survival, there's no predators, there's no food shortage, there's no environmental dangers. They have everything that a living organism could possibly want.
Want or need. Yeah,
But
both.
but what actually happens when you take away those pressures? And the mice kind of went off the walls eventually. It did get overcrowded and they started getting aggressive. They started isolating themselves. There's the ones called the beautiful ones, or I think it's the beautiful ones. And
The aristocrats.
they like just went straight into looks maxing, like grooming themselves and not reproducing, not doing the things that they wouldn't otherwise do. Then it gets kind of dystopian.
Which is not very aristocratic, by the way.
Right. It's so it became this like dystopia where it's like
everything's flipped upside down and nothing makes sense because it's like the beautiful ones, the ones who would just be they would isolate themselves socially and only spend their times grooming and sleeping. They would essentially refrain from reproduction, which is obviously going to be a negative signal in any population of any animal species ever. Our entire purpose is to reproduce. So if you stop reproducing like a lot of humans have done today, there is something seriously wrong with society. There is something seriously wrong with everybody's souls. And this is kind of like what that experiment sheds light on. And it also shows that, today, because we don't have any of those environmental pressures of having enough resources. We have an abundance of food whenever we want. We have an abundance of everything whenever we want, in almost every corner of the globe now. And it especially in the West, where we actually like really have those things, you start seeing like the degradation of society. There's I'm trying to like paint this in the most sort of politically correct way possible, but essentially the same sort of degradation that you saw at the end of the fall of the Roman Empire, with just like, you know, transsexualism, sexual frivolity, separation of the sort of elites of society from the lower plebeian class, that sort of thing. It all just becomes overwhelming, and the structure cannot hold. And Mouse Utopia ultimately fell in on itself and collapsed.
I think I guess the follow-up kind of experiment, you might say, could be, what happens when you take end stage Mouse Utopia
Mm-hmm.
and then you put it in the wild and you open it, and all of a sudden all of the environmental pressures come back. You don't provide the food anymore. They have to go find food. There's predators again. That would be the interesting, okay, can the mice readapt to their nature, this survive, or are they too domesticated and insane to rediscover?
I think it'll be a matter
nature?
It'll be a matter of survival of the fittest. I just made this video, like it just posted 2 hours ago before we started this, on the topic of looks maxing and heroic death, part 2. And in part 2, I go into the idea of physiognomy and how the outer is a reflection of the inner. And this is something that I had become interested in a while ago, like years ago, before looks maxing was popular at all. And I always felt this innate, like, cringe towards looks maxing, because so much of it is obviously focused on the outward appearance, right? And there's nothing necessarily wrong with doing the physical practice. I don't think you should hit yourself in the face with a hammer, but there's nothing necessarily wrong with wanting to do exercises to make yourself more attractive. That's why I started going to the gym. I wanted to train my muscles to make them bigger and be more attractive, right? But it's also because not only did I want to be physically attractive, I wanted to be strong. I wanted to be capable. I wanted to exude a sense of like seriousness about myself. I wanted to exude a sort of like presence that I had about myself, because spiritually that's how I felt, and I wanted that to reflect outwardly. I felt that making myself strong physically would help me to feel strong spiritually, and those sorts of things. There's always this constant Aristotle talks about how the material and the material and the soul, they grow together, right? They are affected by the same affectations, and they grow and change together. And when they do not, you have this sort of uncanny chimera of a person, like, who is this looks maxed. They're the most beautiful. They're like the beautiful ones in Mouse Utopia, but they're unable to actually like reproduce, whether by choice or involuntarily, because either women think that they're strange and uncanny and they have no game, and that their lack of spirit shines through. And so at the end of the day, like, maybe you get a one night stand or something, but she's never going to call you back because you're uninteresting. You have no thumos, you have no soul. Or secondarily, because they're just like these black-pilled individuals who genuinely hate women. And so they're not even going to go out, like, they're just becoming more beautiful for the sake of being able to mog other guys, which is like, yeah, it's fucking, it sounds insane, but that's because it is insane, and there's something seriously wrong with it. And I love that this experiment was done over 50 years ago to show us what would happen if that were the case.
Yeah, and I think we can kind of tie it back to surfing.
I'm sorry, there was one more thing I wanted to say. In the
go for it.
video, I went on a tangent, I forgot. in the video, I talk about how because of this practice of physiognomy, the environment shapes the inward pressures of the individual, and then those create responses that manifest physically. So, for example, if you take a domesticated pig that has lived on a farm its entire life and you set it out into the wild and it's forced to fend off predators on its own, it's forced to forage and find food for itself. It within the span of 6 months, like 6 weeks to 6 months, you will already notice it becomes leaner. It develops more musculature. It starts to develop thick fur instead of just like the pink fuzz that you see on domesticated pigs. It develops thick, coarse fur, and it starts growing tusks because it is literally in real time adapting to its environment. It's producing more anabolic hormones. It is adapting to be able to defend itself, protect itself. And it also starts spiritually exuding more aggressive behavior, trying to mate more often and attack other potential predators and that sort of thing, competing for resources because there is competition. But if there is no competition, then you either become a person who takes that competition on yourself, whether by going to the gym and trying to challenge yourself, maybe you like take up a sport or like do MMA or something. You have to constantly give yourself that challenge because the world's not going to give it to you. Right. And also you have to practice like restriction. You can't just eat all the food that they're trying to give you because you're just going to become fat and sick. You have to like actually be selective about it now because there is none of that pressure anymore. You should only eat the food that you would find in nature because that's what's going to breed the physical you that would exist in nature. You know what I mean? And it's when you start to lose all those things, you can maintain some semblance of humanity, but it's not going to be like the real true you, you know? It's going to be a more domesticated version of you, a more mouse utopia version of you.
Yeah. And I think it relates back to surfing the Kali Yuga and riding the tiger, where it's like, if we're in mouse utopia, you have to be able to surf mouse utopia to an extent. And that means understanding that the modern world and the conditions we are in are not good for our development. And how do you best try to like still cultivate these pressures? And it can't be perfect, right? I mean, the end of the day, going to the gym isn't the same as an ancient warrior, right? But if it's all you can do, it's all you can do. And that's right. Surfing Mouse Utopia, right? So it's trying to not go crazy in this utopia that we have and keep your sanity so that if and when the utopia comes crashing down and all of a sudden we don't have all this food on demand, and there are people who are going to try to inflict violence on you and all these other things that we take for granted not having to worry about. It's like, hopefully you're in a better position to adapt once again to your natural cause. And I think just more philosophically, it's like, yes, you need pressure, you need danger. And we see this, of course, with like the great societies and stuff. The Indo-European idea of fame undying it's like that risk taking. It seems like suicidal and silly, but they're the ones, we're speaking their language because because they were put risk taking and danger takers on such a high pedestal. They could do it better than anyone else. And well, here we are, right? Yes. So I think danger and risk is a very important need for all biological life. You can say we're not the same as mice, obviously, but we see some universal truths to life in all living things, I think. So
yeah, very well said. Awesome. All right, we will move on to the next one. Spooky Scary Spencer asks Ren Fair ideas. I'm leaning toward Geirmundbu helm or a Greek Achilles helm.
Wait, can you spell that first one? I just want to look it up.
Gjermundbu.
Oh,
I share your screen because I want to see this.
Can you see the helmet?
Oh yeah.
It's
Yep,
it's
yep,
the
yep.
one with the this is I think the original find. It's the one with the visor.
Very cool. And you
Um
could have like chainmail underneath it.
yeah, that I think they call it an aventail. I can't remember the technical term. But yes,
I
yes,
see.
you can add the chainmail to the bottom half.
Very cool.
A lot of these ones look like bad reproductions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But this is the style he's talking about. This one,
Or an Achilles helm. I mean, yeah, we love that. We love that.
now Achilles, by Achilles helm, I wonder what he means. If he means more like a
That's
classical Greek or like a truly Mycenaean, or I don't know.
or a
But
truly Myrmidon helmet, you know?
yeah, or like a Troy. I don't know. He could have a bunch of things in mind there, but
Yeah.
and he said Renaissance Festival, right?
Yeah, so you got to go with the German
Yeah,
helmet.
the the Renaissance Fair is kind of funny because it's the Renaissance Fair, but what
Mhm.
like people
Good point.
what it's supposed to be really is more like a medieval fair,
Right.
but like a high medieval fair. We're thinking
Uh-huh.
about jousting and all that, and
Yeah,
a lot of
knights.
people show up in pirate costumes. But
Uh-huh. Yeah.
pirates are not that far from the actual Renaissance. It's like the age of sail and gunpowder is like
Mhm.
that kind of bleeds right into the age of proper piracy. So like I used to think
Yes.
as a kid when I was first getting into history, I was like, why are there pirates? So there's knights. And it's like
Yeah.
actually they're not as far apart. The
No, it's
Viking
actually
might
more
be
accurate to go as a pirate than to go as a knight.
certainly more accurate than as a Viking, although I guess a Viking was
Uh-huh.
also kind of a pirate in a sense.
True. Which kind of pirate are you LARPing as? Yeah, and you could say that Achilles was a pirate too in his own sense.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, if you're gonna bring the Bronze Age to the Renaissance, you
Yeah.
could always go as the Sea People.
See people.
They
Yep.
have the cool, it looks like spiky hair helmet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, but if you want to be like somewhat at like medievally, obviously you got to go with the Viking helmet. I don't know how to pronounce
Yeah,
Gurjabumdu,
German probably.
but really, I mean, everyone's dressing up at the Ren Fair is what they want. Like, do whatever
Yeah.
like you feel better and have fun with it. That's my advice.
Very cool. All right. From Caffeine and Philosophy, in pursuit of wisdom, how does one distinguish esoteric from bullshit? I
That's
think that personally, you know them by their fruits. I think if it's something that's going to reap benefits in your life, then maybe it's like a piece of esoteric wisdom. I think it's all trial and error. You got to try these things out, you know? Um, there are some things that you're not going to be able to immediately recognize. Like, for example, um, let's say like astrology or like, chart reading and that sort of thing. Should you use it to dictate what you're going to do that day? Should you stay home because it's not a good day in your astrological chart? Maybe. Maybe there's some validity to it, but I don't think that it should like necessarily control your life. And so I think letting it control your life makes it BS, but in practicality, it is just like an esoteric practice.
yeah. I think for one, there's obviously a quality of discernment,
Mm-hmm.
which is just a very hard skill to learn in general.
And
Um,
it's you have to learn it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I would say even sometimes you have to be born with it to a degree.
Yeah.
But also I think for we have to be careful about being esoteric for esotericism's sake, or like being niche. You're
Yeah.
like the more just because something's more complicated and unknown and convoluted, I think you can fall into the trap of being like, oh, the secret knowledge nobody knows about. But like you said,
Yeah.
if it's not actually valuable, if you can't get value out of it, um, in my opinion, then it's kind of BS. And maybe even I don't think everyone can get the same value out of something. Something is more wisdom to one person than it is to another. And I think it's
Right.
totally valid for something to be wisdom to you and BS to someone else and vice versa. So I think it does end up taking that personal lens. But I would just be careful in general of like people want to get like super niche and out there, and it's like if you're doing it just for that sake, then you're just gonna end up down some totally nonsense path. And
Yeah.
purity spiral and yeah. So that would be my take.
I love it. I think it's one of those things where we could do an entire podcast episode about like esotericism, but
For sure.
we'll move on for the sake of getting through these questions. Luke Batho 2, favorite Assassin's Creed game?
The only one I played through significantly was Black Flag, and we just talked about pirates.
So good.
It's Black Flag. Black Flag.
So good.
Jesus, for me.
Yeah. I have a Black Flag tattoo here. It's for different reasons, but that's not from the Assassin's Creed game. But yeah, mine is also Black Flag. That was the first Assassin's Creed game that I played. I've mentioned on this podcast multiple times. I grew up. Pirates were like my first love, ancient Greece being my second, but I loved pirates ever since I can remember. That was like my favorite thing. And so, yeah, playing that game was, it was like, you know what? I'll say this about Black Flag. Black Flag genuinely was the first thing that ever like made me go, I have to LARP, you know? I actually bought like pirate paraphernalia because I was like, I need to wear this for Halloween. Like it's going to be sick as hell. And also playing that game, I was just so like enthralled by, it was my first time playing Assassin's Creed. So, you know, like the parkour and stuff, just like how much freedom of movement this guy, I was like, I need to get in shape. I was like, I don't know how old I was, probably like 16 or I was 15 or 16 playing it. And I was like, I need to start running. I need to start going for like long swims so I can be able to like swim ship to ship, you know, like and of course I'm not telling people in my real life, like, yeah, I'm going for a swim at the beach for this reason. But like, I was like, I need to LARP. And it actually got me off the couch and I started like exercising, training because I wanted to be like Edward Kenway. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it made me who I am today.
You know, I had a friend who liked Black Flag a lot too, and Assassin's Creed in general. And we used to have like Nerf sword fights, and he built a wrist, you know, the hidden blade,
the gauntlet with the
and he spent hours on it, and it was like he took a Nerf sword, he like sawed it.
That's nice.
The problem was he built it out of popsicle sticks. So the first time he used it on one of us, it exploded into pieces. And the LARP didn't quite survive first contact. But no, it's great game. Great game.
Super cool. We can probably do this one pretty quickly. Andrew can tell me. He's a Patreon member of mine. He's in my Discord. Great dude. Top 3 bands / musical artists.
Hate to say it.
Don't
Kanye's
say it.
on there. Kanye's on there for me.
I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry. Controversial these days for many reasons.
Sure.
I always love Kanye. He's probably
God
still
knows
the
why.
only rapper that I still actively listen to. I'm not big on rap anymore. After that, ATC, because they made Around the World, and I just did an Around the World video.
Yeah, true.
And after that, I'll let you start on your list while I think of number 3.
My favorite band of all time is this band called Sleeping Giant. They are a Christian hardcore band. Christcore, we call it. I love Sleeping Giant. It's my favorite. I'm actually seeing that they haven't been together for many years, and they're doing like a reunion show in June, and I'm going to it. So that'll be pretty cool. But I actually met the singer because he's in a new band now called Holy Name. Same thing, kind of like metal, hardcore, but like Christian worship music sort of based. Um, that one's number one. God, this is so hard. It always seems easier, like in theory, and then when it comes down to it, like
Yeah.
let me check my Spotify, see what my
That's
most
what I was doing.
saved are. Oh, okay, number two, easily, My Children, My Bride. They're another, I don't know why that wasn't at the top of my head. They might almost be in the running for number one. They're just one of those bands that every single song is good. Like, I don't dislike any of their songs. Every time I put it on an album, I listen to the whole thing through. It's very rare to come across artists like that. I also have seen them play a couple times. I've met the singer. Super, super chill dude. And number three, who am I gonna give my number three to? Should I say my band from high school?
Might as well.
All right, we'll give it to Mailmen, from Hermosa Beach, California. Yeah, great band, kind of like, punk, 80s punk, sort of like hardcore fusion. You can find them on Spotify.
Good choices. I guess if I was looking at my Spotify and I was looking for names that appeared more than once, because I almost never listen to multiple songs by the same artist. And Britney Spears was on there multiple times. So I guess I'm going to say Britney Spears. I feel like I gave a pretty terrible list, but I like what I like.
Kanye, ATC, and Britney Spears for Dane. Okay.
If I thought more seriously, I could probably give a much better answer, but it's just like, man, my music taste is too TikTokified. It's like all the like freaking looks maxing. Look maxing has great music taste, I will say.
This was our logo, by the way. This is the Mailman logo.
Oh shit! Okay,
that's why I have that.
Hell yeah, yeah.
Because people ask me all the time, "Why do you have an envelope on your arm?" I'm like, "Well, I was 18. I was in a band. I have other bands tattooed on me too."
Worthy reason to have.
Yeah, like Black Flag. Black Flag is a band, but I don't know if I put them in my top three. But it's more of a cultural tattoo. This is a South Bay, California kind of South Bay of Los Angeles, California kind of thing. All right, let's see. We'll wrap this up. Last question from Brent Waller. He says, "Where do you guys see yourselves in the next 10 years?" Should I tell him about my dream?
This good as time as any. Although I hope it's sooner than 10 years.
It'll definitely be sooner than 10 years. It'll be within the next year, maybe within even the next 6 months. Who knows? I had a dream that Dane and I had a studio where it kind of just like resembled like an old library sort of, but instead of books on the shelves, there was like artifacts and like weapons and armor and stuff, kind of like what I've got like hanging on my wall, but just in a more curated degree, what Dane's got behind him. Just I like saw it, and there was like this table in the middle with all the podcast gear and everything, and I just have this like vision of Dane getting up to go greet our guest for the day. And I didn't see who it was, but it was just cool because like, the studio, the podcast in person, like this all started just because you and I wanted to have like an outlet for more of our ideas because we love creating content, but sometimes there's just like a restriction on how much you can feasibly do. Right. And a podcast just allows you to just create more ultimately. And so we've really taken a liking to doing this, and you guys have liked it too. And so we really appreciate you guys watching. But yeah, hopefully we will have a studio in the near future. If Dane and I can quit our jobs and migrate, we will end up in the same place, and we will lock down on a studio, and we'll shoot this in person.
Yep. 10 years is a lot further to say, but yeah, I'm hoping this is in the very near future. So I will not add anything to that answer. It's a vision.
There you go. Yeah, 10 years is a long time. If I could just say like one of my 10-year goals is to hopefully have like I want to have like a show whether it's even if it's on YouTube, I would be perfectly fine with that. But I've always kind of liked the idea of like being able to have like a very based network show, because I don't know, something about it just feels more real. And I'm hoping that TV can make a comeback with like streaming and everything. But yeah, like to have a show where it's kind of like getting to discuss like history and mythology in the actual places where they occurred. I really was having like such an incredible time when I was in Greece and I was filming those like 2-3 minute reels for Instagram and TikTok, but getting to be like in front of the Parthenon talking about the Parthenon is just like imbues you with so much more energy that it's like the script is not even like relevant. Like I'm just going off dome and I'm talking about what's in front of me. And I think just being able to do that to a wider audience with a greater budget, essentially, like that'd be my dream.
Very noble. I guess I'll have to say something about 10 years. For one, family, I hope by then kids are well on the way, all that kind of thing. Two, I hope to be in some kind of, I don't want to say position of power necessarily, because that sounds really Machiavellian. But I hope to have some kind of, be in some place where I can leverage influence in an organization. I'm not necessarily a politician per se, but have some kind of organization beyond just content creation, right? Like have something more physical and real, and be able to shape the world. But
see, that's another thing is like I was thinking like with this idea, because obviously like what we're doing with content, we're sharing ideas to people and we're sort of getting them interested in things that like could make a difference, could have an impact. But the ultimate goal is obviously to like be in that position where it's like you can, you know, like we were just talking about like how cool would it be if we could like actually have a say in like the archaeological excavations, like if we could like fund an excavation or something like that to be able to bring new history into the world. And yeah, just to be able to sort of have those kinds of resources, but you got to start somewhere, right?
Right. I guess the ultimate, I would say I love history. I love learning about history. I also want to be a part of history and make history too. I guess that's ultimate goal.
There you go. I love it.
So yeah, I better be emperor in 10 years.
We're gonna reclaim the.
Yeah, we're gonna be don't even worry about mouse utopia. You'll be living in the Dane dystopia.
There you go.
Mandatory historical accuracy in all films. Punishable by death.
We're going to create that too. We're going to have new Hollywood. And we'll figure out where to set it up. I don't know. Probably at Gartha or something. But let's see. All right, guys. Well, wow. This has been a 2-hour, 45-minute podcast. We're on minute 2 hour and 45. Any closing thoughts, Dane?
Nope. I think this might be our longest. So I will just say once again, thank you all. Thank you, Jonas, for finding this great video for us to be able to go off of. And the questions were also excellent. I feel like the questions are getting good. I don't want to say better, but they're getting better as time goes on. I feel like more suited for us to discuss, and we're getting better at answering them. So yeah, just thank you to everybody, and I will see you on the next episode. Any closing thoughts from you?
No, I just, like you said, very grateful to everybody who watches this. If I could give a shout, just make sure that you guys are subscribed on YouTube. If you're not, make sure that you're following the podcast on Spotify and rate it, because it really does help us out. And yeah, the more that we can grow this podcast, the more that we can get the guests that you want to have on the show, because the bigger numbers, they're more eye-catching and they will accept and agree to come on the show. So yeah, just thank you guys so much for watching and interacting. Let us know in the comments what you think, and we'll see you guys in the next one.